Of all the American fighter pilots who emerged after World War II, few remained in the public imagination more than Marine Colonel Gregory Pappy Boyington. This was due to the highly fictionalized and popular 1970s TV show Baa Baa Black Sheep, later retitled Black Sheep Squadron, starring Robert Conrad as Boyington. Many still hold him in high esteem for his wartime accomplishments as a fighter, while many of those who knew Boyington wanted nothing to do with him and considered him unworthy of the accolades he received due to his conduct. Who was the real Gregory Boyington? What made him famous during and after the war? Why were so many of his fellow veterans disgusted with him after the war? Hello, I'm Colin Heaton, a veteran of the United States Army and Marine Corps, former history professor, book author, and welcome to this episode of Forgotten History. Gregory Boyington was born in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, on December 4, 1912, of Sioux and Irish descent. He admired the First World War aviators and loved the idea of flying. During my full interview with him in June 1986, many revelations emerged, but there were also many contradictions that were challenged by many of the men who knew and even flew with him, who I had already interviewed, and others I would interview later and compare notes. Boyington admitted that he was always eager to mix it up in a fight, whether in the sky or in an officers' club, and he admitted that his approach to life made him his own worst enemy. He was always in fights when he was a schoolboy, but he stated that he was never a bully, but he did look for them to change their attitudes. He was also notorious for getting into fights when he was a Marine pilot prior to resigning his commission and joining the American Volunteer Group, better known as the Flying Tigers, under the command of Brigadier, later Major General, Chennault. These were American mercenaries sent to assist China in their war against Japan before the United States was actively involved. In one example, in his own words, "I did have a run-in with a naval pilot, some lieutenant commander, who made some smart-ass comment about my Flying Tiger jacket I was wearing. I asked him if he liked his drink, because it would be about all he could eat for a few weeks when I beat the shit out of him. He said he would have me on charges. I told him to get in line. He was small fry. I had just pissed on a brigadier general. He left rather quickly." Boyington's relationships with the other AVG pilots was somewhat problematic. All the men interviewed admitted that he was a good pilot when sober, but he was not one that they really trusted to have his head in the game when it came to combat. Chennault placed a 2-drink maximum on him during events, and he sent spies to watch him. Boyington often flew drunk, and even crashed his P-41s trying to take off, and he also destroyed a water truck. Once after a combat mission, Boyington was describing a victory when a very wet, very cranky New Zealand P-40 pilot came in. The New Zealander asked, "Who just shot down a single-engine fighter over Segi Point?" Boyington perked up. "Can you confirm it for me?" The Kiwi pilot went up to him and laid him out with one punch, leaned over and said, "Next time, Yank, check recognition." Then he left. Boyington had apparently shot him down by accident, again probably being drunk. Once he ran out of fuel not long after takeoff, and it was suspected that he was flying drunk again and wanted to deflect the blame. But he was a pilot in command and therefore responsible for checking his fuel and pre-flight checks. He blamed the ground crew and crew chief for the event. After Chennault finally banned him from drinking any alcohol whatsoever, Boyington was accused of breaking into the unit's liquor locker, as well as stealing the good stuff. It could never be proven, but the suspicion remained. Boyington decided to part company with the Flying Tigers, who were still flying after the USA declared war on Japan after Pearl Harbor. He was to be transferred to the U.S. Army Air Force as a lieutenant, which did not sit well with Boyington, who had already accused Chennault and his second-in-command, Harvey Greenlaw, of stealing their pay. Greenlaw had been preparing court-martial charges on Boyington for a variety of reasons, from buffalo races to shooting chandeliers in a hotel to killing a water buffalo, strafing it, which Boyington obviously did not do. Other charges against him were just piling up, insubordination, you name it. In fairness to Boyington, he and the other pilots had not been paid for some time, Boyington effectively leveled a veiled threat that Greenlaw would find himself mortally injured if he did not get his money. The men were finally paid and all charges were dropped as well. So Boyington wrote a letter to the Commandant of the Marine Corps requesting his commission in the Marine Corps be reinstated, which was approved, avoiding his absorption into the Army. Also in contention was Boyington's claim that he had 6 victories with the AVG, but their records only show that he had 3.5 victories, 3 clear kills, and a shared enemy kill. Once Boyington managed to return to the Marines with the rank of Major, he decided to form a squadron. He stated the situation in his own words. "I spoke to the Marine Air Group 11 commander, Colonel Lawson Anderson, who gave his off-the-record approval, and I went to work collecting pilots wherever I could find them. Not all of these men were fighter pilots, but anyone could be converted, or so I thought. I just started finding guys." Boyington managed to score 22 victories with his famed VMF 214 Black Sheep, which, when added to his confirmed 3.5 victories with the AVG, brought his score to 25.5 victories, which would have made Joe Foss the #1 Marine ace with 26 victories. However, the Marine Corps decided to accept the extra victories from China and Burma without question, a situation that did not sit well with the other Flying Tiger pilots who knew better. Boyington was shot down on January 3, 1944 on a mission over Rabaul and picked up by a Japanese submarine. He would remain a prisoner of war until Japan surrendered. U.S. Signals Intelligence decoded an intercepted message from the Japanese Rear Admiral at Truk Island, requesting Tokyo's permission to execute a field-grade USMC officer just rescued at sea, which had to be Boyington, who was listed as missing in action that day in that area. The former staffer said his boss immediately realized the implications, knowing that Boyington had been recommended for the Medal of Honor, but also knowing his reputation. He apparently said, "Let us hope that the Admiral's request is granted," something to the effect that it would spare everybody a good deal of trouble if Boyington were just killed. Boyington ended up in Japan with other American pilots and air crews, where his reputation took an even deeper nosedive. F-6F Hellcat pilot Frederick DeWitt Turnbull, a naval officer, was already a POW when Boyington arrived, and his observations, courtesy of historian Barrett Tillman, are of great interest. Boyington was assigned to work in the Japanese officer's kitchen. No other POW had ever worked there. No one ever learned how he got the job. A nice elderly lady was the chief cook, and one thing became very apparent. While all the other POWs were starving to death, Greg Boyington was gaining weight. Now this was at the time when Fred and the others had actually risked their lives to escape at night to steal vegetables from nearby fields to try and keep those too weak to walk alive. As it became obvious that Boyington was getting extra rations while working in the kitchen, the camp seniors had a meeting to decide what to do about it. It was decided to confront Boyington and encourage him to try and steal some food for the very weak men, since he obviously had special access, some meat here, rice or vegetables there, anything to help the starving men. When he was approached, Boyington flat out refused. He said it was too risky as he had a good deal going and he wasn't going to do anything to screw it up. Over time, he was approached by many to please help the other men, and each time he refused. While Boyington was being hailed as a hero in the United States, he was being shunned by his fellow POWs with utter contempt. There were other instances that made things even worse with regard to Boyington's reputation. By the time they were released, Fred Turnbull said Boyington probably had just one friend left in the whole camp, and he was no jewel himself. Birds of a feather. This stain on Boyington's character followed him all of his life, and most of the men who attended the Medal of Honor reunions avoided him, since when he drank, he tended to get out of control. Once, at a Medal of Honor reunion, Boyington got drunk and wanted to wrestle Joe Foss, who was pretty well built. But Foss said Boyington was as strong as a bull, and he could not be stopped physically. Boyington shoved him against a pillar, and Joe's head connected with it, and he said he saw stars. Finally, Foss got an arm free and clobbered Boyington with a fist. Much later, Boyington knocked on Joe's door and said something like, "We sure had fun, didn't we?" Fellow Marine pilot and Medal of Honor recipient Major General Joseph Foss stated, "Boyington did his job, but his character was less than stellar, in my humble opinion." Fellow Flying Tiger and 18 victory ace, 12.25 victories with the AVG, Brigadier General David Lee, Tex Hill said, Boyington lives in a very strange world. It's okay to visit, just do not take up residence. Air Force Colonel and prior enlisted Marine George E. Bud Day, a colonel and Medal of Honor recipient from Vietnam's notorious Hanoi Hilton, said, "Greg was a walking contradiction, and he was never able to see himself as the train wreck all the rest of us did. It really was embarrassing for us, the military, especially the Marine Corps and the Medal of Honor." However, one man who supported Boyington was fellow Marine Lieutenant Colonel Robert Wesley McClurg, who flew in VMF 214, and stated that Boyington was an inspirational leader who led by example. "Pappy taught me what I needed to know to succeed and stay alive. He is why I am still here. I owe him that." Former Flying Tiger, Brigadier General and Medal of Honor recipient James Howard said, "If bullshit artists were a military occupational specialty, Boyington would have been at the top of the promotion list. Take what he tells you with a pound of salt. However, he is very entertaining unless he is drunk. Then you just want to get the hell away from him." Fellow Medal of Honor recipient, Navy Captain and top Navy fighter ace David McCampbell remarked, "If you have an event where alcohol is being served, protect your open bar. I would suggest armed security." Historian Barrett Tillman, who also knew Boyington and is a friend of mine, related an event. He said, years later, Fred Turnbull confronting Boyington in public at an event in Reno, Nevada. He stood in front of Boyington, who looked up and said, "Hi, Fred." Fred then yelled, "These people think you're a hero, but I know the truth. You're a lying, worthless piece of shit." Boyington got up and disappeared into his RV. Boyington died on January 11, 1988 in Fresno, California. He is still credited with 28 aerial victories, 6, according to Marine Corps records, with the ABG. Joe Foss said, "I wonder if they put a bottle of scotch in his casket. That would be the best send-off." Gregory Boyington was a paradox, beloved by many, hated by several, and avoided by most who knew him. However, despite his recorded victories, the actual ABG records credit Boyington with only 3.5 victories, so until the record is properly corrected, Boyington will still be falsely considered the top Marine Corps ace of World War II, an honor that should have gone to Joseph Foss. He is still ranked as the top Marine Corps fighter ace of the war, although there is great controversy and solid evidence as stipulated that this is just in fact not true. In fact, if facts mean anything, that honor would go to Marine Corps ace Joseph Foss. For all of his faults, Boyington created and led the Black Sheep to an enviable record, and they all became legends under his leadership. Besides the Medal of Honor, he also received the Navy Cross for heroism, and despite other factors in Boyington's life, he was indeed a brave man. What most biographers and historians ignored over the years are the great controversies surrounding his career as a fighter pilot, his 16 months as a POW, and his altering certain facts regarding situations to benefit himself, and ignoring his dissenters who flew with him, including those who were prisoners of war with him. Who was the real Gregory Boyington? We leave that for you to decide. His full interview, as well as the interviews with Joseph Foss and David McCampbell, are in my book, Above the Pacific, available in paperback, ebook, and audiobook from Penguin Random House. Thank you for watching Forgotten History. Please click like, subscribe, and share. Send us comments and show ideas, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. Until next time.